All right. None of this. I see how you are.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you know when Carlina will be back?
No, she just asked to be excused for this meeting. I know that much. So,
Last Saturday, right? Whatever.
yeah, Saturday. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll call this meeting of the Palmer City Council to order at 6 o'clock on February 27th, 2024. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Deputy Mayor Anzalotti, Councilmember Cooper,
Present.
Councilmember Best,
Here.
Councilmember Tudor,
Here.
Mayor Carrington,
Here.
Councilmember Moline, here, Councilmember Alcantara.
Here.
All right, and if you remember, I believe Councilwoman or Deputy Mayor Anzalotti asked to be excused because some excuse of going on her honeymoon or something. So we'll list her as excused. If everyone could join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and ask Noah if he would lead us. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have the approval of the agenda. What's the wishes of the council?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, and that includes the approval of the minutes for the February 13th regular meeting. Is there any objection to approving the agenda and the minutes as presented? Okay, we'll consider those approved unanimously. Next, we have communications and appearances, and I think we have Carla Swick in the house. And so if you want to come forward and give us an update on the Sister City program. Is that on yet? Might have to push the button on there's a button on the very bottom. Hold it for a few seconds.
I got a green light.
All
looks
right,
like.
all right.
Hey, all right. Konbanwa. Watashi no name wa Mackenzie Moore desu. I took French in high school, so that is about as good as I can get with Japanese. But my name is Mackenzie Moore. I'm a social studies teacher at Palmer High School. I'm also an alumni of Palmer High School. I grew up in this community and graduated from Palmer High in 2006 with the International Baccalaureate Diploma. And I really credit this town and that school with all the things I got to do afterwards, the great places I got to go, and my successes subsequent to that. It's been just an absolute career highlight for me to be able to return to the school that gave me so much in the community that I call home, and it's been really, really wonderful to give back to the people who raised me and the community that raised me. So I'm really excited to be able to help participate in this Seroma Sister City Exchange. I didn't get a chance to go when I was a student in high school, but it still impacted my education with the stories and knowledge that my friends and classmates brought back with them. It changes the school, being able to have those connections with other students from around the world. And this year's delegation is really cool, and they're ready to continue that tradition and that history. We've got a lot of engaged and really passionate kids who are already participating. We last week had a Zoom session with Seroma School, and students were presenting about their communities, and it was so fun to be able to see that connection happening. These kids are really excited to go and learn, but also to share what makes Palmer so cool and such a wonderful little town to grow up in and to be a part of. They're civically engaged. They want to be contributing members of their community, and this is a great way to do that. I'm going to introduce Carla Swick, who has a lot of experience with the Seroma City Exchange. She's an alumni of it herself, and she's got some stuff to share as well.
Konbanwa, minasan. Thanks for having us. We just kind of wanted to give an update and let you know our delegation has been meeting since last fall, and like Mackenzie Sensei said, they're awesome. And then also we don't, we know we always have your moral support, but I know every year we, in the board has also financially helped these students. And I know for me that that was something that helped me back in the 80s, get to go to Saroma. Not, all students have the funds to make that happen. But these, and for me, it was that first, I would say, civic connection to Palmer. Just this week, it made me think of some kids that took part in this program who are, and I would say because they went over when they were in middle school, maybe it was 7th grade, but that really gave them, I think, the wings or planted the seeds for them to be civically minded and then have the courage to go on and do bigger things. We had Tobin Huschauer. He went over as a middle schooler from Palmer Junior Middle School. I just found out last week he made it to the final stage where it's the interview stage where he might be hired from the national government of Japan to be part of the JET program, as well as Grace Strong, who also is in her senior year. So 2 of them we had, if you know Sam Vanderwill, who's been involved. I saw him this Christmas. He brought back, he's going to Kansas City University. He brought back 5 students who are exchange students from Japan that he brought to Alaska for Christmas. And then Jameson Roa, he was on the delegation last summer. And the consulate of Anchorage put on it was a contest for all sister cities. We've got 8 sister cities in Alaska with those in Japan. And I would say Palmer is one of our most active, if I can't say the most active, but you had 23 different submissions from the different sister cities in Japan and Alaska. And Roa did a video. He took all the film clips and pictures from our trip from here to Tokyo to Saroma and then coming back to the city of Palmer. And he was awarded the 2nd place winner. So that was just, again, promotion of Palmer, Saroma. So we just wanted to say thank you so much for your support. You'll get to meet the students, and we just want to keep asking for your continued support. I think it really does get these kids involved and set them up for the future. So domo arigatou gozaimashita. Oh, and our dates, we're planning on leaving May 27th. Right after school ends, and then we would be returning June 14th. So that's 2 weeks homestaying in Saroma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have some proclamations, and I've asked to share the wealth here. We have a Matthew Mitchell, and I've asked some of the council members to read these proclamations. I don't know if we've got someone. I don't know.
Just read it.
Well, yeah, read it for the record, and I'm sure we can find someone to pass it on.
Okay. This is a proclamation recognizing Colony wrestler Matthew Mitchell. Whereas Matthew Mitchell, an outstanding and dedicated wrestler from Colony, has demonstrated exceptional skill, perseverance, and sportsmanship in the field of wrestling. And Matthew has shown remarkable determination and resilience throughout his wrestling career, capturing his first state championship as a sophomore in 2021 and continuing to compete at an elite level. And whereas in his senior year, Matthew Mitchell again displayed his exceptional talent and dedication by winning his 2nd career state title, solidifying his place as one of the premier wrestlers in the state. And whereas Matthew's journey, marked by a triumphant pin in the 3rd round against a formidable opponent from the Fairbanks-based Student Wrestling Development Program, showcases the spirit of true sportsmanship and competitiveness. And Matthew's achievements are not only a testament to his individual talent and hard work, but also serve as an inspiring example of what can be accomplished with dedication and passion for one sport. And whereas his contribution has been instrumental in the success of the Colony wrestling team, fostering a sense of pride and community spirit among his peers, coaches, and all those who witness his journey. Now, therefore, it is proclaimed by the Mayor and City Council of the City of Palmer, Alaska, that February 29th, 2024 shall be Matthew Mitchell Day, in the city of Palmer, and we encourage all citizens to join us in celebrating the outstanding achievements and contributions of this exemplary student athlete. In witness hereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Palmer to be fixed on this 27th day of February 2024. Thank you.
And then, Mr. Manager, I think you've got a proclamation for Amelia. Okay.
Would it be okay if you had your family come out too while I read this?
We suspect they may have been involved in some of her success, so. Ooh.
So, I'm John Moosey. I'm city manager, and this is the first time the mayor said I could do one of these, so I'm gonna make sure it's a really good one, so I picked tonight to do this. And I picked you specifically, so a proclamation recognizing Colony wrestler Amelia Fawcett. Whereas Amelia Fawcett, a remarkable and dedicated wrestler from Colony, has demonstrated extraordinary talent, resilience, and sportsmanship in the field of girls wrestling. And whereas Amelia, through her junior season, exhibited a level of performance akin to a well-oiled machine, culminating in a state title that stands as testament to her skill and dedication to the sport. And whereas in the ASSA Girls State Wrestling Championship, Amelia dominated the 145-pound weight class, achieving a technical fall victory with an impressive 15-0 score, showcasing her superior technique and strategic acumen. I pronounced that right. Did you catch that? Whereas Amelia's perfect season record of 33-0. I got to repeat that again. Perfect season of 33-0, including her remarkable journey to the finals where she pinned opponents in under a minute. Comment. All these people up here can't do anything for the minute and you pin an opponent. Her achievements not only reflect her personal commitment and hard work, but also serve as an inspiring example for young athletes, especially girls in wrestling, encouraging them to strive for excellence in their endeavors. Amelia's national ranking success in her tournaments across the country further underlined her status as a standout athlete, demonstrating her capacity to excel both within and beyond state boundaries. And Amelia played a pivotal role in leading Colony to finish as runner-up in the team standings. What happened to the rest of your team? You didn't finish first. Contributing significantly to the team's success and fostering a spirit of teamwork and excellence. Now, therefore, it is proclaimed by Mayor Steve and the City Council of the City of Palmer, Alaska, that today, February 27, 2024, shall be Amelia Fawcett Day in the City of Palmer. And we encourage all citizens to join us in celebrating the outstanding achievements and contributions of this exemplary student athlete. This was signed and sealed by Mayor Steve Carrington. So would you like to hold this and we get some pictures? Yes, you can. Since I chose this one, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
We have one more proclamation, then we'll take a little break so we can congratulate them. So Councilman Alcantara, I think Noah's here because he led us in the pledge.
No, you need to come on up here, be part of this. All right, everybody, I'm John Alcantara, City Council member. Long time ago when I was a freshman in high school, I was, believe it or not, 5'1" and 105 pounds. I wish I'd have taken to wrestling like this kid did. It would cut me out of a lot of trouble, I'm sure. So this is a proclamation recognizing Colony wrestler Noah Justice. Whereas Noah Justice in his first season in high school and in Alaska has shown incredible adaptability and prowess, rapidly establishing himself as a formidable athlete in his weight class. And whereas during the ASAA First National Bank Division I state championships, Noah demonstrated his exceptional wrestling abilities by securing a championship in the 103-pound weight class, a remarkable achievement for a first-year high school wrestler. And whereas Noah's victory, marked by an impressive pin against a skilled opponent from South Anchorage, way to go, Matsu, reflects his dedication, strategic acumen, and relentless pursuit of excellence in wrestling. And his journey to the state title, marked by his move from South Carolina to Alaska, is a testament to his resilience and ability to excel under new and challenging circumstances. And whereas Noah Justice's achievements have not only brought pride and recognition to the Colony wrestling team, but also serve as a source of inspiration for young athletes, encouraging them to pursue their passions and strive for excellence in their endeavors. And whereas his contributions to the sport of wrestling exemplify the values of hard work, perseverance, and sportsmanship, setting a high standard for his peers and future generations. Now, therefore, it is proclaimed by the Mayor and City Council of the City of Palmer, Alaska, that February 28th, 2024, tomorrow, shall be Noah Justice Day in the City of Palmer, and we encourage all citizens to join us in celebrating the outstanding achievements and contributions of this exemplary student athlete. Signed by Mayor Steve Carrington.
Oh, get the parents, yes. Right. And we'll take a break here so we can congratulate people.
Yeah, I had to take my socks off, and I'm barefoot, but I have shoes on, but I don't want shoes to go out.
What's that?
Can we bump it?
Bump it? Me.
Might put my hat on.
Yeah, you needed a place to start.
I have a microphone stand on my desk at work just so I could.
Oh, and put your hat on?
I think this is good.
I'm glad. Oh, I know, Josh had it.
Okay. Just trying to decide if I want water or not.
Well, yeah, that's the issue.
That is the issue.
I do know
Yeah.
exactly. That's why I don't
You know,
have-
there's
that's why I don't have-
implications.
I know,
Yeah.
that's why I don't have any water.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like oftentimes I'll get like an inch or something. It's like just
Well, last night was 45 minutes.
that's it's the right meeting for it.
You know, I'm just saying, that's
Yeah.
making me think I'm not drinking any water. That's why I'm saying.
What can we steal here, huh? Yeah, that one looks good.
Are you gonna start like a minute?
Why, you wanna run and get them?
Yeah, like the box.
Sure. It's only been 5 minutes. Some people are running to the bathroom. Hey, I started on time. I think that's what shocked everyone. His last meeting with Linda, we waited. Yeah. Well, everyone was kind of loud, so it's like. Yeah. Good job, John. I'll have to ask you to do more. Reading. Yeah, yeah, you did get to pick. I was nice. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh, what? All right. Glad you could set the standard, right? Well, since both clerks left, there's no way I could start. You know? The clerks travel in packs, yeah. Okay. All right. We'll call a meeting back to order. Next, we have the city manager's report. Mr. Manager.
Good evening. I got a lot of stuff tonight. First off, we have coming up our booster station bid. This is to get water to the Colony Middle and High School. We have a lot of interest, so that's great. We think we'll get a very good price in that. And this is a partnership we have with the Mat-Su Borough. They've given us $2 million to make this happen. So we're pretty excited about that. So the bid should be coming out very shortly. So also too, yesterday myself and Jude Billifer met with the new college director. Back when the college first started, they had their own well and septic system. And then through the expansion, the city, they allowed the city to bring their lines through there. They got a good deal on water and sewer. But they have an abandoned well that we think is possibly good. So we talked to them about in the future of us acquiring that well. for additional water service. So you'll probably be hearing that in the next few months about any progress that we make on that area. Also, too, many of you, if you have our water, receive this stuff in your billing regarding your water pipes. So you've been asked to fill this stuff out. So first off, please note, you can throw this away and you can ignore us. There's no requirement for you to do so. But this is required by the federal government based upon what happened in Michigan, where all the people were poisoned by lead pipes, that sort of thing. So they are asking us if our citizens, our users, would give us information on what they are, what type of pipe they have, and there may be money to come down to help you personally replace potentially bad and dangerous pipes. So if you'd help us out, that's great. If you don't want to help us out, that's cool. But it's an opportunity maybe to help each other out through this. And then the thing we went with staff today, fire chief's been involved, police chief's been involved, community development guys been involved, public works have been involved, is we have the Arctic Winter Games coming up. And there are expected to be 1,850 athletes from the northern part of our world coming to this. There is over 2,000 volunteers to take care of the 1850. And they are working on things such as potential emergency evacuations, safety for the kids, with all the events. So Palmer High School, or Palmer Middle School, we have volleyball going on. At the MTA Center, we have curling. And also, too, they're housing kids in the high schools, in middle schools. And there's also some native games competitions that's going to be going on at Palmer High School. And of course, also, too, at the swimming pool. So that stuff is happening, pretty important. AWG, Arctic Winter Games, awg2024.org. You got the schedule, you have everything over there. This is probably for us here at this table, except maybe for Josh. This is like a once-in-a-lifetime thing that we can be involved with. So there's a lot of work making it good for that. State has invested millions of dollars into this. Matsu Borough has invested millions of dollars, and we have invested thousands. So, also too, I believe some stuff for City Council should be ending up coming this week, and so I'll distribute to that as soon as I get it for you. That's all I have for this evening.
Okay. Does the council have any questions for the manager from his report? Okay. Next is the mayor's report. I've got a written report in there, kind of highlighted I guess it was last week, they had the Palmer Community Resource Day and had quite a few people in attendance for that. And then I did my own summary of the lawyer's report where I asked more questions than she did. But, and you can see that's probably the bulk of what we're going to be covering tonight. We don't actually have any other active business, so it's probably a really good night for this presentation. So I don't know if there's any questions for me from my report. Okay. Clerk's
Mr.
report.
Mayor.
Oh, yes, sir.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind, you were down there with a few of us, other members down in Juneau lobbying. You didn't say anything about.
Oh, that's true. We were down in Juneau. Well, actually, would anyone that was down there, do you want to have a comment here?
Sure. Yeah, we can wait till council comments if you'd
Okay.
like. I just wanted to remind you in case you wanted to go ahead and.
Yeah, we did. How did that happen? Yes.
Just a quick question, Mr. Mayor, on the Resource Day. Did you see an uptick in vendors or participants there versus the previous year? I heard there was somewhere around 27, 28.
It was about double the participants, was about double, and then there was also people coming for exploring about resources as well as local community people wanting to understand what's going on.
Thank
So
you.
it's about twice as big as last year. Okay. All right, city clerk's report.
I don't have a formal report, but I'm happy to respond to council questions if anyone has a question.
Anyone have any questions for the clerk at this time from the council? All right, next is the city attorney's report. And I know in the last year I have had many, many conversations with the attorney, and it seems half of them have to do with books and libraries. And it's kind of been an
Is this on?
ongoing attempt for me to understand what there's a screen you can see if that comes on the screen.
Is it on now?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm just, yep, perfect.
So you're planning to do a presentation and then we're supposed to maybe hold our questions?
Yes, please. So,
Okay.
and everybody, I like to buckle up because this is going to be a rather in-depth presentation. It's not exhaustive, though, despite what the mayor keeps saying it is. Lawyers never say anything is exhaustive. That would imply that we know everything and end all, and we certainly do not. So, good evening, council. You and the public have had access to my report and the references in the report. In summary, this presentation is an overview of the current legal status in Alaska. Thank you. Only he can do that. This presentation is an overview of the current legal status in Alaska and in the United States of how constitutional, federal, and state law is defined and applied to a public library. There's further details and resources in my report. Applying the law and understanding the context and the correct questions to ask as we go through this is sort of like building a Lego set. So each individual Lego is going to have its foundational piece and definition that we need to create a final product. So with that in mind, I'd request that you do hold your questions to the end. That way I'm not addressing a Lego that's here when it would fit better here and it's related to others. We'll have lots of time since we have no legislation, and we can go into whatever questions you would like, the council would like to address. So in order to begin an analysis of how is the law defined and applied to libraries, we first have to ask the foundational questions so that our definitions and understanding are all on the same page. And these are some of the questions that I asked and that I have been asked and that you have asked me as we've participated in this tension that's sort of building in the community. What is a library? What is its history? What is its purpose? Under what laws and authorities does a library operate? And does the library, and I'm referring specifically to public libraries, have any legal obligations? In doing so, how is the City of Palmer authorized to manage and administer its library? And then where does the City of Palmer's authority come from? What laws is the City of Palmer then subject to? What does the Alaska statute say? And what does case law say? Case law is the evolution of law coming from the U.S. Supreme Court. That's part of our constitutional checks and balances that we have in terms of the legal field. And then to conclude with it all, I wanted to give you a summary of some ideas and actions that other jurisdictions have taken. So the first question has to do with the history of the libraries. History of public libraries in the United States predates the American Revolution, which I discovered during this process. I did not actually know that. As the district court in Arkansas stated, this is a district court, not the U.S. Supreme Court, and a case less than 6 months ago, our founding fathers understood the necessity of a public library for a well-functioning democracy. This emphasis on the American historical and cultural value of a public library, its history, its purpose, are important as we use them to ultimately define what the legal obligations are of a public library. And that was the analysis that the court began in the district court 6 months ago, as well as throughout the analysis of public histories from the Supreme Court. This is a quick quote I found interesting in terms of just the history of it. and I won't read that to you all, that's in the report as well, but Benjamin Franklin in 1731 began the first public library in the United States. Similarly, the Palmer Public Library history also predates the city of Palmer and the statehood. The Palmer Public Library was officially recognized by the Territory of Alaska on February 11th, 1946. Palmer Public Library has a rich history and value to the city and the community of Palmer. And this is the Palmer Public Library's mission statement. So its purpose is to provide residents of Palmer and the Matanuska-Susitna Borough ready access to a broad collection of materials and a variety of media that record human knowledge, ideas, and cultures, organizes these resources, provides guidance and encouragement in the use of library materials, and provides the community with access to reliable and available sources of information and references. If you'll pause for 1 second. I'm talking a lot. So, what is the role of a librarian, and are there any legal requirements associated with that as well? These are particular quotes that have come from recent, from various case laws. But the consideration to define and understand the role of the librarian and the professional expectations upon them is also a foundational analysis that we need to conduct, that the court will also look at. Similar to lawyers and doctors and accountants, librarians are held to a professional code of ethics that requires them to look beyond their individual belief systems, and they're required to consider the public as a whole. Just as a lawyer may have to set aside their personal belief systems in order to honor their client, that is the same obligation that is placed upon the professional expectations of a librarian. This means that, quote, librarians are tasked with safeguarding the public's First Amendment rights to receive information by resisting the efforts to censor library resources, which is putting them in an interesting, challenging position professionally. So it's important for the council and the public to understand these professional standards that the librarians career-wise are held to. It's also important to note that this is their career, and our current librarians are employees of the city of Palmer. And so just to reiterate, like I've done in the past, the city of, the council in support with the city of Palmer in no way and at no time allows for city employees who are not elected officials to ever be harassed, attacked, or otherwise villainized for doing their job. They are city employees. And additionally, as I stated on April 11th, 2023, when the manager presented his report on library policies, I worked administratively with him evaluating those and informed the council that the library policies had been in place for nearly 10 years, and they were illegally administrative policies. Just had to get out that the city does not condone harassment, attacks, threats, etc. of any city employee. So now that that's stated, let's move on. So having discussed the history and the purpose and the role of librarians, these all support that the courts have found legal obligations of libraries. There are different legal obligations between a school library and a public library. A public library is held to a higher standard and has obligations to uphold the First Amendment, more obligations to uphold the First Amendment rights than a school library does. Primarily because the public library's purpose is for the public dissemination of access to information as a whole, where a school library is more narrow in focus and narrow in audience because we're discussing solely the education of minors. Schools also have legal obligations, but they have a lot more wiggle room than public libraries do. I am only addressing the law as it applies to public libraries, not school libraries in this presentation. Public libraries are going to have all the obligations that a school library has, plus some. And specifically, the federal court has recognized that the burden on a public library is a limited public forum to uphold the First Amendment, and that in comparison to school libraries, the right to receive information is vigorously enforced in the context of a public library, as opposed as to considered in a school library. For example, when a plaintiff shows, so in order to, I just want to show the minimal amount that lawsuits have been stimulated by violating the first, by charges against the First Amendment, according to the public libraries, which I'm going to go into more. But I wanted to address this quote and then bring it in again at a later date. When a plaintiff shows that her ability to access information has been impeded by state action, however minimally, then the court has recognized that that's sufficient concrete injury to confer standing for a First Amendment. That is a burden solely placed upon public libraries as opposed to school libraries. So their focus is more and more narrow. So when we begin to evaluate those different pieces, we want to follow the flow of authority. The Palmer Public Library, while it has a legal obligation, it operates underneath the City of Palmer. So then the question needs to be, what laws are the City of Palmer then subject to? The City of Palmer is subject to the U.S. Constitution and federal law. It's subject to the Alaska Constitution and state law, and it's subject to city code and charters. The Palmer City Charter operates as the constitution for the City of Palmer, which outlines the roles and authorities of the city manager and the city council. For example, the city manager is tasked with administration of city operations and policies, and the city council is tasked with legislation and budgets. The City of Palmer is considered a home rule city, which operates under its own charter and city code, and it is controlled under the Alaska Constitution by Title 29 of the Alaska Statutes. But the really important element that is most applicable to us tonight is that any resolution or ordinance passed by the Palmer City Council cannot supersede laws from a higher authority. They cannot supersede the U.S. Constitution and federal case law, and they cannot supersede Alaska Constitution and state law. So in that question, we jump into the first argument that everyone always wants to know is how does the First Amendment relate to libraries? To read, because not everyone understands exactly what the First Amendment is. The First Amendment is located in the Bill of Rights. It was ratified in 1791, stating that Congress shall pass no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or press. The First Amendment is applied to state governments, both our state government and state governmental bodies underneath the state government, through application of the 14th Amendment and is defined by the U.S. Supreme Court. The provision and the value of the United States Constitution is embodying our national commitment to the free exchange of ideas. This national commitment to the free exchange of ideas is one of the most vital, important, and fundamental values we have as a nation. It's our balancing act as a nation. It is the same constitutional rights, if we begin to look at these different pieces, that allow people to decline taking vaccines. They are allowed to post opinions and blogs on social media. Audience participation is an element of this. We strongly value it. You're allowed to burn an American flag and protest. That's protected underneath the freedom of speech. You're also allowed to march in DC, March for Life, or any other marches in terms of supporting it. There's nothing more important than our First Amendment. And it's easy when you're part of the current majority to want to limit others' rights that may be offensive to you. But that's a slippery slope. What happens when you're no longer in the majority? The First Amendment curbs the government's ability to do this, and the intention is to stop the weaponization of government against a people or individuals of a specific belief system. And certainly we as a nation have not been perfect in applying that, but the checks and balances built in for the court to be able to define or strike down federal or state law as unconstitutional, especially when it refers to freedom of speech or expression, is what separates us from every other country on earth. And we certainly saw that during the pandemic. Even if we don't personally like what is applied, it's vital to not sacrifice the integrity in the application of the First Amendment, nor are we allowed to as a state body. For example, I personally find it reprehensible for anyone to burn an American flag. I've lost friends in war, but the Supreme Court has ruled that it's covered as a First Amendment, under the First Amendment, as freedom of expression. Therefore, it's protected speech, and the government cannot ban that behavior. The application of the First Amendment solely lies upon governmental bodies. I, as an individual, or even as a business, can indeed limit someone's speech. They can limit the expression of speech. That's where we see the lawsuits in terms of, like, we want to protect our brand integrity in social media. The application of the First Amendment only lies upon governmental bodies. The requirement to uphold the First Amendment lies solely on the government bodies, not an individual. It's the First Amendment that ensures that government has no power to restrict the expression of its message, its ideas, its subject matter, or its content. We're currently seeing this application being played out in the United States Supreme Court with the case Missouri v. Biden. Just for quick background, that's where the state of Missouri is suing the federal government for violating individual freedom of expression by censoring it on social media platforms. The Supreme Court has held and will continue and has released portions of their findings on that, primarily saying that that they have found that there is evidence that the government has limited speech on social media, and are ruling in favor of Missouri, and we're seeing that part fleshed out. So how do we apply the application of the First Amendment? First, a governmental body creates a law. Then the law potentially places a limitation on a person's expression of ideas. That is automatically going to trigger a First Amendment court analysis if there's a lawsuit. When a plaintiff shows that her ability to access information has been impeded by state action, however minimally, then the court has found that this is sufficient concrete injury to confer standing in a First Amendment claim. When the court does an evaluation, and when I say court, we're referring to the federal court. These are lawsuits that are sued in federal court that end up going potentially up to the Supreme Court. The court will ask if the limitation of the person's expression is based upon the message, ideas, subject matter, or content of what they're saying. And if the court finds that the limitation placed upon that person's expression is related to those items, then a strict scrutiny analysis is applied by the court. This is a standard of constitutional review. Strict scrutiny has existed since the 1790s and states that when a governmental body passes a law that may restrict or infringe a constitutional right, then the court uses strict scrutiny as a standard of review for the constitutional lie. This is the absolute highest burden of proof required of a government body. The criminal equivalent of this would be beyond a shadow of doubt. So the burden of proof then placed upon a governmental body to prove why they passed the law they had that does impede someone's freedom of expression has 2 points to it. It is one, the government needs to demonstrate that they had a compelling governmental interest for why they think that this is unprotected speech. And then they must narrowly tailor that specific law to only affect those individuals and the consequences of the right that they need for a compelling governmental interest. The court has recognized that there are exceptions to First Amendment rights. We have aspects and throughout United States case law that has evolved to identify areas of unprotected speech. These are areas that the court has ruled that the government has met their burden of proof and they have passed the strict scrutiny standard of review. These are then the categories, these right here, of speech that is not protected under the First Amendment. For this conversation related to libraries, there are 2 relevant categories that have repeatedly come up. Those are child pornography and obscenity. Obscenity and child pornography are often used interchangeably in casual discussion, but there are distinct legal differences between them. For clarification, child pornography by law is not when a child is reading what someone may consider pornographic material, but is when the child is the subject matter of pornography. There is current legislation in Juneau to change the definition in the state of Alaska of child pornography to child sexual abuse materials. And it's my personal opinion that that is a more accurate description. So what we're going to discuss here is obscenity, and that's the distinction between child pornography and obscenity. Obscenity, like child pornography, also has very specific terminology associated with it. In order for the First Amendment rights to be a First Amendment right exception, so that would be allowing for the government to limit an individual's First Amendment rights, it has to meet the First Amendment exception, and obscenity is one of those categories. In Alaska, we do have obscenity laws, and they are called harmful to minors. And those are what I'm going to get into in terms of breaking down the specifics of how those are applied. Historically, there's always been tension between restraining freedom of thought and expression and the values of a community's morals. These political clashes between religious belief systems, art and literature, clash with community values, have existed since the beginning of the 1790s, and they have stimulated a broad amount of questions. It's not a new debate, and it will continue to be debated in the future. The word morals by themselves are derived from mores and the customs which are deemed essential to the well-being of a group. Because they are so difficult to define already, there's automatically going to be rendering controversy when freedom of thought and expression clashes with the value of community morals. That's where we are right now in the city of Palmer, in the state, and really around the nation as I was doing the research, as this tension has been rising and the definitions and clashes have been occurring. The questions that communities and legislatures and courts have been asking since the 1790s and are still asking today is, when does a material rise to the level of obscene? Who has the authority to make that decision? How does that balance with the scales of freedom of expression, which is protected by the First Amendment? These are the questions that have generated how obscenity is defined federally and adopted by the states. The main question is, does society want the government to have the authority to tell the public what they can and cannot read, what materials the public can and cannot access, what materials we want limited for our children? This is the tension. The tension is, where is the line and what is the definition of obscenity? And that is the greatest challenge when you look at case law, is how do we define obscenity? What actually is considered obscene? How do we create that line defining appropriateness and inappropriateness? When does the material rise to the level of obscene? Is it a reference to drugs? Is it a single reference to drugs? Is it a reference to sex? Is it a description of sexual acts? Is it a use of coarse language? These are the questions that have generated the development of obscenity laws. Courts have then tested these laws using the strict scrutiny standard of review to determine whether an obscenity law is an allowed exception to the First Amendment, or is it an unlawful First Amendment violation by a governmental body. When we discuss, and the heated part of discussing the definition of obscene is the community, like a Webster dictionary definition, or the legal definition. And there's a significant difference between what an individual community member or community members may subjectively determine as obscene and what the law says obscene. The local subjective community standard is honored and is recognized by the court in 2 of the elements of the Miller's test, which I will explain shortly. As the Alaska legislature has wrestled with this community tension, their attempt to clarify it has been with the definition of harmful to minors, which is also the Miller's test, which is also the law on obscenity, and that is found in Alaska Statute 1161-128, specifically Section C. The U.S. Supreme Court has also struggled for a definition of obscenity, as they've sought to resolve the tension that obscene speech since Roth has long been held to fall outside the purview of the First Amendment, but then the court struggles how to define it in a manner that does not impose an impermissible burden on protected speech. This is a direct quote from Roth v. United States in 1957, following the McCarthyism period. This was the first time that obscenity was considered an exemption to First Amendment, and specific materials were allowed to be banned by the Supreme Court. Since Roth, there has been continued discussion and wrestling within the United States Supreme Court until they finally settled on a definition. And these have evolved and are the current definitions we have in the state of Alaska. And they've evolved from 3 specific court cases, beginning with Ginsburg, Miller, and then Pope. Prior to this, case law has varied significantly. The 2 cases that have combined to take the Alaska current law is Ginsburg, because that is referring to children and their First Amendment rights, and then Miller versus California. Pope arrived in 1987 and further defined the standards within Miller. So, beginning with Ginsburg. This case was the green light for states to create laws for harmful to minors definitions of obscenity. where a material may be evaluated upon age appropriateness in Alaska. The verbiage here is under 16. So Ginsburg found that a minor has First Amendment rights, but because a minor has not fully developed their capacity, their First Amendment rights may be limited. Those findings then translated into legislation, and we currently have our harmful to minors law, which lists the requirements and then say for a minor under 16. So it would be for a common minor under 16. So it began to create age-appropriate brackets is what Ginsburg began to do. It also addressed who gets to make the determination and how it's applied, and they left that open to be further defined by the Miller's test. Ginsburg was in 1968, and here's the quote from that: "The freedom of speech codified in the First Amendment is enjoyed by everyone, even children. However, by virtue of the fact that minors are not possessed with the full capacity for individuals, then their First Amendment rights may be limited." Miller versus California is perhaps the most influential determination of it all. And again, this is the basis of what current Alaska law has. So prior to Miller, in the 1960s, the United States Supreme Court had struggled with how to define pornography. Justice Potter Stewart, this is early 1960s, famously concluded, and we all learned about this in law school, "I know it when I see it," in terms of defining what pornography is. Prior, again, to Miller, obscenity was defined, and this evolved from Roth and following cases, as being, quote, "utterly without redeeming social importance and therefore undeserving of constitutional protection." The challenge with this definition is that all obscenity was applied, and if it was determined to be utterly without any redeeming social importance, then that was considered obscene materials. However, the utterly without qualifier for the test, so just to throw that out, created an impossible burden to meet, since any argument that there was even a hint of value in that material would throw out that definition being able to be applied because it didn't pass the strict scrutiny review. Excuse me, let me take a drink. Following Ginsburg, the United States Supreme Court revised the definition of obscene in Miller versus California. And they took the terms utterly without redeeming social value and narrowly applied it to mean, quote, lacking serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And it's that analysis that we currently have with harmful to minors that we're going to break down. So then Pope v. Illinois in 1987 further refined the standards of the Miller's test. The Miller's test has 3 prongs in it, and the U.S. Supreme Court held that the third prong, the prong that quotes, is considered the valuation prong, where it says serious, literary, artistic, political, or scientific value is interpreted by applying a reasonable person standard. This is really important because this is where most people read the Miller's test, and particularly read the Miller's test case law prior to 1987, which there was quite a bit, and say, well, yes, that material equals obscene. But at the time before Pope v. Illinois, that was a subjective standard. The contemporary community values were able to identify it and say, yes, the local opinion said that was obscene, therefore the material was obscene. Pope threw that out and said that we have a reasonable person standard on this third prong as we begin to analyze the Miller's test, saying that it's an objective standard, not a subjective standard, and not a contemporary community standard. And that is where we begin to apply the definitions of the Miller's test, which is the current law in the state of Alaska. Pope further went on to clarify, just as the ideas that a work represents need not obtain a majority approval to merit protection, neither, insofar as the First Amendment is concerned, does the value of the work vary from community to community based on the degree of local acceptance. It has one. Again, establishing that this is an objective standard for a national standard versus a local acceptance standard. The proper inquiry, defined by Pope, is not whether an ordinary member of any given community would find serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value in the allegedly obscene material, but whether a reasonable person would find such value in the material taken as a whole. That law the Alaska legislature has put forth their own definition of obscenity. So those are the three things that we're going to bring in. The Alaska legislature, using Miller's test, was later refined, and Pope v. Illinois was adopted into Alaska Statute 1161-128C. The Miller's test with the defined standard of Pope is what the current Supreme Court definition is for what is legally considered obscene. So when we look again at that original application of laws, the obscene definition in both the United States and in the state of Alaska are the same thing, and that is the Miller's test. So on November 16th, 2023, the Attorney General of the state of Alaska sent out a letter outlining Alaska's law as it obtains to obscenity. Specifically, this letter introduced and stated current Alaska law. It did not go into, they may be follow-up letters that the Alaska General may send out, but it did not go into specific definitions of what the definitions within the statute, what the standards were, or even what Miller's test specifically is. However, what he did state was that the definition of harmful to minors is the obscenity law in the state of Alaska. And for the public and for the council, that's on my report. But AS 1161-128C in its entirety has 3 different prongs. And we're going to go through each one of those prongs and explain the definitions and the elements of each part so that everyone will know how to apply the appropriate definitions of the material. In the state of Alaska and in the United States, every crime, and I'm referencing crime because the harmful to minors is located within our criminal statutes. Every crime that is charged has specific components in it. In law, we call those components elements, and the elements are what define a crime. This is why we have public defenders. So like whatever charges you get when you're arrested by the police and they put the charges in and prosecution charges you with the counts and the different specifics, those all translate directly with a law, and the elements and the sub-elements of each of those laws have to be applied to you in order for you to be able to be found guilty. Specifically, they have to be beyond a reasonable doubt for prosecution to occur. We have the same thing here. So when we begin to look at the First Amendment protections under the definitions, this is the process that we go through. The city of Palmer is subject to First Amendment requirements. There are exceptions within the First Amendment, and obscenity is one of them. And obscenity then is defined by the state of Alaska in harmful to minors and by the Miller's test. And when all the elements of the Miller's test are met and all the standards within that, then that material would be considered an exception to the First Amendment as well as a crime under harmful to minors. I got ahead of myself. That's exactly what I explained right here. So, analyzing the elements of harmful to minors. It has 3 elements, all of which must be met for the material to be considered obscene. Within each element, there are standards, sub-elements, and definitions. Let's take element number 1. This is considered the contemporary community standard. The average individual applying contemporary community standards would find that the material taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest in sex for persons under 16 years of age. The first definition we find in here is considered a standard. This is the contemporary community standard. When analyzing this, it's going to determine whether an ordinary member of a given community would find that the person has read this and is guilty. But the key here is that the standard itself is a localized, subjective standard which allows for a jury to consider the majority opinion of the local community regarding whether or not this is obscene or not. Element 1, continued, has the next section taken as a whole. So again, the average individual applying contemporary community standards would find that the material taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest in persons under 16 years of age. Taken as a whole means that the material must be analyzed as a whole as opposed to single segments of the material. This was challenged in the Supreme Court in 2002, and the court defined that and added the requirement as taken as a whole, stating that the artistic merit of a work does not depend on the presence of a single explicit scene, and therefore where the scene is part of a narrative, The work itself does not become obscene, even though the scene in isolation might be considered offensive. The third definition of element 1 is prurient. This is marked by an arousing or an immodest or unwholesome interest or desire, specifically appealing to sexual desire. And that's an application for those under 16 years of age. So I'm going to switch to element 3 because it's element 2 in the state of Alaska that is the really difficult prong. And element 3 is relatively easy to establish, and it has the same standard community standards, the local subjective standards, as element 1. Element 3 states, the material depicts actual or simulated conduct in a way that is patently offensive to the prevailing standards in the adult community as a whole, with respect to what is suitable for persons under 16 years of age. Patently offensive means so offensive on its face as to affront current community standards of decency. This is a relatively very easy element to meet. That's solely based on we read something, we're adults, and we find that that is inappropriate as a community for my child. I don't want any children reading that. That understanding would meet this definition of element 3, patently offensive. Again, the prevailing standards in the adult community, that verbiage for the court equals the contemporary community standard. Same as element 1, subjective standard. So the court has acknowledged that the community, local community opinion matters in 2 of the 3 elements for harmful to minors. It's element 2, which is located in Alaska Statute 1161-128, subsection C, little 2. This is the part that hangs up the majority of the books. This is where most of, around the lower 48, this is where most of the lawsuits have been denied or have been found to see First Amendment violations because this element wasn't met. And this is the reasonable person standard. Element 2 of harmful to minors states, a reasonable person would find that the material taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, educational, political, or scientific value for persons under 16 years of age. This is the same as Miller's element 3, but in Alaska statutes, they put it as element 2. This is the value judgment, and it's the most strict and difficult to meet, primarily because it is an objective standard and it's not subject to local community determinations of value. This is what has been added by Pope. It's a Supreme Court standard initially held in Pope. The proper inquiry is not whether an ordinary member of any given community would find serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value in allegedly obscene material, but whether a reasonable person would find such value in the material when it's taken as a whole. This was recently interpreted in Michigan on October 25th, 2023 in federal district court, where the judge dismissed a lawsuit against a Michigan school district that allegedly had explicit books in the school library. The judge found that they did not meet the definition of obscene in the Miller's test. And I thought this was interesting because the judge stated that while he personally agreed with the plaintiff's concerns about the sexually explicit nature of some of the texts and illustrations in the book, they did not qualify as being harmful to minors because the books as a whole have literary value. And the plaintiffs who were suing to remove the books could not establish that a reasonable person would not find value in the identified works as a whole, primarily because the books identified by the plaintiffs had already received accolades or had been on bestsellers list. And because they had been acknowledged by someone, there was value because someone in the United States had recognized that there was reasonable value to the art, and therefore it did not meet to being a First Amendment exception of obscenity. Again, element 2 has a taken of the whole requirement, where a single explicit scene does not eliminate the entire piece, even though the scene in isolation may be offensive. So there's also the terminology in element 2 of serious. What does serious literary, artistic, and educational scientific value mean? Serious is an essential qualifier in meeting the elements and the requirements of this element. This allows for an intent determination of the material for the judge or the jury, the triers of fact, to consider in determining it. They can determine what was the intent of the author, the artist, and be able to put this forward to convey it. If the intent is to convey a literary, artistic, political, or scientific idea, or to advocate a position, then the intent is automatically considered to be serious. So as a whole, element 2 is the one that is the most challenging to overcome. And that's where a reasonable person would find that the material taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, educational, political, or scientific value for persons under 16 years of age. Material depicting sexual activity may be offensive to some, but it may still have literary, artistic, political, or scientific value to others, and as such would not likely be considered legally obscene. In addressing the literary, artistic, education, political, or scientific definition, again, we have the Supreme Court case Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition in 2002, where the Supreme Court held that the visual duplicate depiction of an idea, specifically that of teenagers engaged in a sexual activity, that's been a fact of modern society and has been a theme in art and literature throughout the ages. Themes of teenage sexual activity and sexual abuse of children have inspired countless literary works and has cited Romeo and Juliet and several award-winning movies as examples. And then continued to repeat that while there may be a single explicit scene, that does not discount the entire value of the work. So in applying that to the City of Palmer, my job as the City of Palmer is to explain to you, Council, the status of the law within our current landscape, and to highlight areas or actions that could lead to liability and litigation. Currently, the Mat-Su School District removed book materials, and that has given rise to a current lawsuit by the ACLU that they are engaged in, where the federal court will need to determine if the school district has violated the First Amendment rights of students. This is in process and no ruling has yet been made. Recognizing that there is current tension between the freedom of expression and community values, my question then, as I'm pursuing this, are what are some solutions or resolutions to this tension? And that would come to, when approaching strategy, especially legal or political causes, the question would be, what is the goal? If the goal is only to bring awareness, then that is being accomplished through freedom of speech and protest, and the City of Palmer has experienced that. But if the goal is to evoke change, and if so, what change is being sought, then long-term change has to occur within the boundaries of the Constitution. They cannot infringe upon constitutional rights. So communities around the United States are wrestling with what this looks like. And so how are other states handling this? What strategies have they used? There are 4 different strategies that have been used with varying degrees of success. The first one would be at a state level, amending or creating an obscenity or harmful to state minors law. Not all laws, all states have harmful to minors, but all 50 states do have obscenity laws in place. This approach is taken at the state legislative level. And if it's found to be constitutional, if the Alaska State Legislature amended or created a more narrowly focused obscenity law or harmful to minors law, then that would allow that definition to be adopted at the municipal level for every community and public libraries. Pages 14 through 17 of my report illustrates those 3 pages of legislation in 27 states that are currently going on. There are many states that have multiple different pieces, but we have a total of 27 states, not including the state of Alaska, that are trying to address this issue at a state legislative level. Arkansas is in the middle of being sued for one of theirs, but the other states have been successful in either proposing it or recently passed it, but it has not been challenged before the Supreme Court yet. The second possible approach would be to request a legal opinion from the Alaska Attorney General's office. This approach, asking whether it's the district attorney's office or a sheriff, we don't have sheriffs, we have troopers in the state of Alaska, but the state level of authority to make a further determination has been done in various communities. I found 3 specific examples of Colorado, Wyoming, and Florida. In Colorado, the district attorney's office was requested to make a legal criminal determination as to whether certain books in the school library would be considered legally obscene, and therefore they would be subject to an investigation of criminal conduct. there in Colorado, the DA found that those specific books that were presented by a group to make a determination were not considered obscene, and there were no grounds for criminal charges. I believe this was a matter of 4 specific books, none of which have come before the city of Palmer. In Wyoming, the sheriff's office responded to, this is the sheriff's office, they also asked a determination on 4 youth books for obscenity, and the Campbell, whether or not the Campbell County Public Library should be subject to criminal prosecution. And there, the DA's office and the sheriff did a joint analysis on those 4 requested books and determined they did not meet the requirements of obscenity, and they declined to pursue any criminal charges. In Florida, the county sheriff's office responded to a request, again, of young adult library books to be investigated for obscenity. The sheriff's office specifically said that it fails the 3rd prong of the test laid out in the state law, specifically the one that I mentioned to you, the element 2, that which is taken as a whole would be without serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific values for minors, because the books that are being challenged have award-winning pieces of nonfiction, or they had positive reviews or are on bestseller list. Again, no grounds for criminal charges. But those were 3 approaches, and there may have been more. I just found those 3 when the local communities specifically requested for the Attorney General's office or the prosecuting attorney's office to offer an opinion on specific books that they were being concerned about. The other 4 actions are related to potential First Amendment challenges, and that is 1, removal of materials from public libraries or school libraries, and then the next one would be limiting access. A reminder that a public library has an even greater expectation to protect the First Amendment rights than a school library. So if you look at page 18 through 23, these are the related court cases that I was fined. It's not exhaustive list, and I separated them according to, put them into summaries and separated them according to school libraries and public libraries where relevant, and then tried to break down fact patterns, which the city of Palmer may or may not like to do, erring on the success of it, as well as broke down what the court held. These cases overwhelmingly, the court found that removing of library materials especially from a public library, has been found to violate the First Amendment. Relocation of materials. So it's not just the action of removing a book from the library that can trigger First Amendment infringement. It's also limiting its access. And the cases that and fact patterns to illustrate that are located on pages 23 through 26. And again, they were found overwhelmingly that removing a book specifically based on its content or ideas are considered to be a First Amendment violation. Questions?
Now we can ask some questions. Councilman Tudor.
Now that I've exhausted you all. Hey, that was nothing like law school, just saying.
So I just want to say thank you. This was a lot of good information. One of my thoughts was, I know Wasilla just recently had a restructuring of where books are in their library, the adult section. And I know in this, you're talking about how there's been lawsuits about that have resulted in libraries needing to move books back. Have you heard anything about what's going on with Wasilla or anything, like anything local that we could draw upon? Because I think there was a lawsuit too with the Matsu School District. Was there something about that?
There's an ongoing current law school with the Matsu School District. So that was filed also in November by Northern Justice and the ACLU regarding the school district. I believe they put together a panel of individuals competing of private citizens and some administrators and teachers, and they've been identifying books to be removed. Because those books were removed, they're in the middle of a current lawsuit. So the removal of those books are on hold, and the federal court will have to make a determination on whether or not that is unconstitutional. There has not been any lawsuits, I think, in terms of last I heard that the Wasilla City was, when I spoke to their attorney, that they were waiting to hear what the results of the Matsu school district lawsuit would be. They did remove all their young adult books and put them into adult only. The only thing I found similar to that in case law was where a school library removed all specific challenged books and put them in an area called social justices or social issues, and that was considered unconstitutional by the court, and they were first forced to bring them back.
Yes,
Sorry,
Councilman Malik, Councilwoman Malik, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the attorney, thank you very much. While I know you clearly love the law, this is obviously your passion. You're very well-versed in the law. But one of the things that I just want to maybe touch upon is that our ask was more about policy and process and how that was developed at the Palmer Library to ensure that everything was current, that it fit within the law, and how that process was developed. Because I think that there's been kind of some shades of gray in timing of when we asked for that, as well as what we saw posted online, as well as dates not appearing as to when certain things appeared online. But then also, I think one of the questions that we have, or excuse me, that I have specifically is more around what's our process with the ALA? Are we required to be members of ALA? Is there membership dues that are paid to the ALA, and how that impacts our process? If you could maybe expound on that just a little, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, Council Member, through the Mayor. In question to your policies in general, I was trying to see if I had a copy of it, but April 11th in 2023, the manager put forth together an actual packet and memo that clarified all of our policies. Those have been in place since 2004, I think, maybe 2008. And those were initially developed at that time on April 11th. I did tell the council that I had looked at them. They were legal policies. Our library is allowed to develop those. They are also in similarity in conjunction with several libraries around the United States. One of the things as I was going through this particular piece that courts do look at is if we are modifying our current policies to target a specific subject matter, content, or idea. And if we are doing that, then we're creating a restriction, a First Amendment restriction, and those policies would not be considered valid. So our policies as a whole, and I could get more research on that, but that I would redirect you back to the April 11th memo that explained how the policies in terms of our collection and development, as well as the ratings nationally, where those all came from. I do not have an answer, and I could research in terms of how deeply involved we are with the ALA. I don't actually know that off the top of my head.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up, a quick
Sure.
follow-up. So I think that we also had asked, or we had agreement, that we wanted a little bit more in-depth rather than just the vocalization of that these were up to par. I think we wanted to be a little bit more schooled on the policy and how this policy came about, what the actual processes for electing board members, as well as how we fit into the equation, as well as friends of the library, and how all of that intersects and maybe connects. And maybe we didn't do a good enough job at asking that, but I find that a little bit more what we would like to have. We would like to know the in-depth, the seeds of all of that.
So I believe the manager is essentially, in charge of the internal policies and procedures. And so I think that's how that was developed. Now, which manager, who knows, but.
Well, okay, just to clarify, that was asked of the manager. That was asked to go through the attorney to come back and clarify that. So, thank you.
Councilman Tudor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, just to kind of another follow-up. I think you just mentioned a second ago, but if there was a policy, and policy might not be the right word, but when we get incoming books to the library, I imagine that any kind of screening of those books to see if they have literary value to our community, I imagine that would also probably be, would that be considered unconstitutional too, or is that okay? Because I mean, we obviously can't get every single book that's ever published, but I mean, are we able to put guidelines in about things that could be seen as obscene?
Through the mayor, that would depend on the guidelines. So the key point in terms of a First Amendment evaluation, which we have to do an understanding of First Amendment valuations and reviews for them and current liability going on and current items before we can even discuss policies. You have to have an understanding of the obscenity law. The law is the foundational Lego. You need it in everything to be able to build anything. And our policies are up here. The law is down here. So the city of Palmer does have a collection development policy. And again, those policies were all presented to the council on April 11th by the manager. And that is intended to provide guidelines. So they've identified the scope of the collection, the responsibilities for material selection, and criteria for selection. So, and I can read that real quick. In Palmer, the factors that influence the selection of library materials are the author's reputation and significance as a writer, the importance of a subject matter to the collection, like is there any other book that addresses this in terms of finding balance, the availability of material in other libraries or in print, the timeliness or permanence of the book, the authoritativeness, the inclusion in standard bibliographies or indexes, the price, the demand, or the format, including quality of binding, legibility, and illustrations. In addition to that, the city of Palmer emphasizes like local artists and local art as well in part of their criteria for selection.
Councilman Alcantara.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Heath, kind of join the chorus of thanking you for this presentation. Fascinating and very illuminative. I'm just I hope the public, besides the ones that are here, can take the time to read what you put in the packet and to maybe go back and listen to this presentation because it's very eye-opening. But on your very last slide, you talk about relocation of materials. What are examples of limited access? Because don't we already do that by age group? And I put too fine a point on this, but I think back to movie ratings, and I remember 35 years ago when I was younger than the guy to my right, NC-17 ratings came out instead of just having G, PG, and R ratings, and people went ballistic about how people were gonna, crawl over broken glass to go see NC-17 movies, and reality just the opposite happened. But I just wonder, do we already have labels on our books that not that they're PG-13 and R and NC-17, but don't we already have a 14 and over section and just different things that we're already doing? Or what's the examples of limited access that we may already be?
Thank you, Councilman. Through the layer, I would say you can't be too nuanced because these are very nuanced questions. So in terms of limiting access, it's solely specific to why we're limiting access. And that's when you talk about a constitutional review. Are you limiting access because of the subject matter, the content, the ideas that are trying to be promoted? So examples, and I'm referencing page 23 of the report for limiting access are either recategorizing them or moving to a different section. So the most recent, or not the most recent, but a really interesting case would be Sun versus the city of Wichita Falls. And this is where the city council of Wichita Falls in Texas, this is in 2000, were moved by a group of individuals from the public. And they passed a resolution, the city council do, called the Altman Resolution, that voted to restrict access to all books all the books, particularly on a challenged group, from the children's area of the library to the adult section of the library. And the test that the Altman Resolution allowed was that if 300 citizens signed a petition and that was considered sufficient, then those books would be automatically, without being challenged, would be automatically moved to the adult section from the children's section. They'd still be in the library, but they'd be in the adult section. And that was struck down by the Supreme Court, because that was considered, you allowed 300 individuals to define access of an entire community based upon their opinions. And that was solely based upon the content of the books. So in the city of Palmer, we do have young adult, we have children's section, right, which is in a totally different area. And I don't know how many people have physically been to the library. I've been spending a lot of time there lately. But the new rental we have for the library is smaller than like my living room. That's a tiny, tiny room. So we have, 1/10 maybe of the books on the shelves. So we have a children's section, which currently is in a physically totally different area, a study section, and then a young adult and an adult section. We've also been discussing with the librarians in terms of, for efficiency, but not based on content, would be for separating the young adult section into grades, because 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade is different than 10th, 11th, 12th grade. And that's what they're in the process of doing. That will take some time for evaluating it kind of based upon their ratings. But then you sort of do have your 14 to 16 zone, 13, 14, 16 zone, 17, 18, 19 zone in terms of young adult and then adult.
And one of the difficulties, you mentioned labels or categories, those have traditionally been based off of what the publishers put on there. And that's, but that is how the system's been working and been used. So any change to that would be exhaustive, shall we say.
It would be exhaustive. Unless it was changed from a legal perspective. One of the interesting things is I really didn't find, there might have been too many attempts from public individuals actually suing the either publisher or and the reviewers that do the labels and the categorization of young adult versus adult. And that would be a really interesting just legal inquiry. Currently, that's of course not something the city of Palmer could do, but if a group of citizens were interested in that, that could create a legal determination that might be helpful as well. But right now, there is a system and there's an industry standard in place, just like there is for movies, and we follow it based upon what the author, the publisher determined the age group for that book.
So you mentioned 4 action scenarios and then listed some of the difficulties with all of them. Is there any 1 or 2 of those that you suggest we should consider above the others?
Bravo to, the case laws that are listed. These are people that didn't have negative fact patterns. They took the risk, whether they were counsels or forever, to make a determination and then were defeated by federal court. So action scenario 3 and 4, which is removing and limiting books, I would strongly discourage the council from making those determinations solely because the case law is really held for it to be overwhelmingly considered a First Amendment violation. It'd also be interesting because we have a lawsuit currently going on that will be state-specific to Alaska regarding obscene materials when there's a determination on the school board and the Mat-Su School District. I personally think that the idea of requesting both state legislature support in addressing it at a state level, as well as the Attorney General to make a further determination would be really useful.
Okay. Councilman Best.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much of your presentation really hinged on once a community has a book in the library. And I get that, where once the book is on the shelf and now we want to say, you know what, we think maybe that subject matter should be adults only and not children, and then that's where I'm hearing that we risk somebody suing us, somebody, utilizing a child under the age of 16 to force, say, that they weren't able to access that book for whatever particular rationale. We're at risk at that point. My questions to you, and I've got several, so I hope that the mayor will allow me to continue on a little
Continue.
bit as we go down this, is in the creation of our book holdings, do we have full authority to purchase the books that we choose to purchase, or are we required to accept any book given to us? Is that in our policy? Is it only books that we are purchasing, or are we required to accept any books?
We
That'd be
are
my
not.
first question.
Okay, sorry.
No,
I didn't mean
no,
to.
and I'd like to have the
Okay.
answer before I move on to the
Okay, I
next.
was like just checking. In terms of, and I can get more clarification on this, but it is my understanding that when we're talking about donated books, that our collection development policy allows the quality of the book and the demand of the book to be considered, if it's old and it's beat up and it's not valuable and it's not in demand, to be cast aside. Like, there is not a specific requirement for every donated book to be accepted by the City of Palmer Library. To the other question that you asked in terms of it being relative to books that are only on the shelf, we currently, and we have not since the collapse of the library, have all of our books on the shelf. And there has still been significant criticism towards the library for having them listed as even part of the library development, those challenge books, even though they have not been on the shelf. And then when the book has been challenged, so in the case,
I don't want to go down this path.
Okay, all right.
Anyhow, my next question is, in the development of our holdings, since we are part of a consortium of libraries, and if there was a book that was questionable prior to us purchasing it, it would be accessible through the other libraries that we participate in this consortium with. And so if we do have a demand for a book that might be considered questionable, that we are still providing access to anybody that requests it. We can then request it from another library. It goes into a room, and then that is held until the person that has requested that book has access to it. So we're not limiting the access to the information, because what I hear a lot of times is book banning, and to me, book banning is we'd like to have every single one of those books destroyed, that it should not exist. That's book banning to me. To me, the holdings of a community library is a participation in commerce. We as a community fund our libraries with our tax dollars, and the book industry is an industry. They promote books. They sensationalize certain subject matters. They promote it. We look at the financial holdings of some of these companies that are producing these things, and some of them are pushing agendas. And so I don't want to participate in the commerce of funding some of these things. What I would like to do is to have a system where we as a community are supportive of everybody's ideals, and if there's a desire for a particular book, that we have requests for a book, well, if it's in the consortium and we have access to it. Now, if there's a backlog of people that are really wanting to read this book, well, I think at that point we have a duty to purchase that book and put it on our shelves. And so this is where some of these constitutional ideas, where I am a big fan of freedom of speech. I don't want to limit the freedom of speech, but there's the gray lines that seems to be being pushed and shoved down people's throats to have to participate in the commerce of something that they don't agree with. And so that's where I struggle with this. And to me, if we look at the root cause, is really the root cause of whoever has the purse strings on purchasing of books? And so maybe that's a situation where we need to have a different filter to understand when we buy a book. Because I think that if there's a need for a book, then let's bring the book in. And you know, I come from a family of librarians. You know, I've got 2 or 3 members of my family that have been librarians throughout the years. And I know that librarians are very passionate about protecting the freedom of speeches. But I think that we as a society are kind of going down a different path that, you know what, I mean, I could write some completely horrendous things and get it published. Do I think it should be in our library? No. So I really think that we need to focus on how our library books are purchased, who has the authority of that, is the information accessible within the consortium, is there a process for us to manage that and to track that? And if there is a higher calling for it, that, you know, because I don't want somebody to have to wait 2 or 3 years to be able to get a book that they want to read. You know, we need to have that access. Thank you.
And if I could comment on that.
Yes, go ahead.
That process is actually currently in place. So the Palmer Public Library does not have every book that is objected to around the United States. They have an extremely small sampling of them in physical books. The other books are that the Palmer Public Library is a member of the Library Exchange around the state of Alaska with the universities, and a large portion of the books are requested that way. The Palmer Public Library also tracks how many times within zones, quarterly, annually, and so forth, how many times that book has either been requested or actually circulated. They have circulation data on those individual books. Several, you know, whether it's 60 times in a year or 30, how quickly is it turned around? What is the demand on those pieces? Some of the challenged books were books that were specifically requested and put in. Now, we've only actually had one challenge airing on 2 challenged books entirely in the city of Palmer. But I do know that there is several challenges in the other libraries around the United States, but specifically around Alaska. So to address that, yes, that is not, you know, that is a practical facility in the terms that we have a library network, because no one library can contain all of them. And the overwhelming majority of challenged books are in the library network, not in the City of Palmer Library.
Councilman Best.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I knew some of that information, but you know, one of the books, if memory serves me right, that is controversial. That and this is where it raises my desire to understand how we're developing and purchasing these books. That one of these books was nearly on its way out already because it hadn't been checked out. So that causes me to ask the question, why in the hell did we have that book to begin with then? If there wasn't a desire or a need or a request or people beating down our doors, why in the hell did we have that book? And that's the problem that I'm having with. And that's where I want, in my opinion, that's where I think purchasing the books need to come back to here.
Yeah, I have a point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cooper.
I think that the conversation I thought was supposed to be directed towards the attorney's presentation as opposed to necessarily preaching to the choir. And so I would hope that Councilman Best would, you know, hold your comments till council comments as opposed to, you know, asking something that's totally outside the presentation.
Okay.
If I may, I would like to respond to that because this is a discussion that we're supposed to be having the discussions with our attorney so that she understands our positions on things. And so this is how you get to understand what I'm thinking, how I get to understand what you're thinking. So I appreciate that. But I mean, this is about the presentation. It is all germane to this community discussion we're having.
All right. Madam Attorney.
Yes. So We could certainly, I can get the exact numbers for that, but if I recall, the situation in the book that you were talking about, there's a 3-year deadline. It was very close to the end of that. That book was initially requested by a public member of Palmer to be placed into the library. That's why it was even present. That's how it evolved in the first place. And since it was located in the adult sexual education section, it just remained checked out, and it was just about to be filtered out before the demand significantly increased for it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And it wasn't quite exhaustive, but thank you for the report and understanding. And I think next is, we have an agenda. Audience participation, but I think I need a break. So we'll take a 10-minute break. Yeah, I need the bathroom.
Like some people that are fairly obvious.
I appreciate this. It's an opportunity for all of us. But I also agree with you. If more than we could pay together, we could sell fair. Mike and I
All right. So we will call the meeting back to order. And where are we at? So next we have audience participation. Council meeting rules protect your right to testify and be heard even if others in the room disagree with you. Council meeting rules also ensure that those attending can express their views if they do not interfere with the rights of others to see and hear the proceedings. At all times, order and decorum will be maintained in keeping with the civility and dignity of the legislative process. Also, has been noted, we were checking in code, and actually our code says that we should limit our audience participation time to 30 minutes. Total. Total. So, all right, we will, there's a reference there if you want it. Palmer Code 2.04.120. So we'll open audience participation. And please sign in and start with your name.
Is it on? Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jackie Goforth. This is on? Okay. What I'm going to be handing you out at some point when she'll give it to you is the effort that's going on globally to normalize pedophilia and to sexualize the youth. And it starts with the WHO, who put out their nice little binder that says that children 0 to 4 should learn masturbation. And if you don't believe me, I have the entire binder, okay? Next we have the UN that came out with their International Commission of Justice that says sex under 18 should be legal. Then we have in the USA and California, House Bill 145 that says it's no crime to have sex with a minor as long as you're not more than 10 years older. They can be 14 and you can be 24. You've heard of Pride? Well, I'm not even going to go through Pride because I'm going with the American Library Association. The American Library Association has written a document called Freedom to Read. Freedom to read is a statement. It is not a legal document. It's only been legislated into law in one state, that is Illinois, because that's their home state. Freedom to read has zero value anywhere in the United States. Right now in New Jersey, it's being fought. It's being fought in New Jersey because it's against the law. The first law it's against, it's in direct violation of the First Amendment because it takes away a citizen's right to redress a grievance to the government, and it moves it over to the librarians. The second reason, it's against 3 different, boy, I have all these down and I'm just going to find them. It's against 3 different court cases. It's against the Board of Education versus PICO, actually. The freedom to read was a concept made up by the American Library Association precisely to deprive parents of their rights. Do you know that the freedom to read violates Milliken versus Bradley? It's a document that's not a Bill of Rights. It's a mere aspirational creed of librarians that a court of law found means nothing. And it's a violation of the United States versus American Library Association in 2003. And the quote from that is, all of the justices agree, the interest in protecting young library users from material inappropriate for minors is legitimate and even compelling. All members of the court appear to agree. So, I know what the Miller case law says. And I know that it is based on the standards of the community here in the Valley. Not the standards in Juneau, not the standards in anywhere else, and not the standards of the Fairbanks Library, who said at the American Library Association chapter meeting last March of the Alaska, that they extol the necessity of sex-themed books for use 12 and over. And I'm going to finish at my next. Thank you, sir.
That's your time.
How come it didn't ring?
It did.
I'm just too loud?
You were impassioned.
Sullivan versus New York, 1964.
I appreciate your passion, Jackie. And I think more people in this community need to know what's going on with the books.
Can you
Oh,
start
I'm
with
sorry.
your name?
Karen Lewis,
Thanks, Karen.
Mr. Mayor and Council. We've got a problem here, not only here, but in the state and in this nation. These books, I mean, how you get them out? I mean, if it's determined upon the spectacular praises of the publisher. You know, publishers used to be careful about what books they would advise to go into libraries because they'd get booted if they didn't. Now, they are pushing this filth, and it's nationwide. It's like an agenda that's going on. And we will figure it out. With God's help, we will figure this out. We will not allow this to go on and twist the minds of our children. I mean, we were created to have husband, wife, procreative, love, and the things that they put into these young children's minds. By the way, 14-year-olds are not young adults, which is what they're designated. 14 and 15-year-olds are 16 even. They're not young adults. They are teenagers, young adults, 18 maybe. But to destroy something that was so beautiful that, you know, we were given this husband, wife, children, beautiful thing, and it's completely twisted in a lot of these books into something that's not recognizable. It's not beautiful. It's putrid. And we have to get it out of the hands of our young children, especially the 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And did you know that even if they were in adults, the kids can check them out? Anybody can check out anything. Okay, so the Freedom to Read Act, I'll continue on, violates the First Amendment of the United States Constitution Bill of Rights. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution Bill of Rights holds Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the right of the people to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The FRA abridges the freedom of speech via a number of means, including punitive lawsuits. The FRA entirely eliminates the seriously impedes the ability to seek redress of the government. Grandparents will be precluded by law from acting to protect their grandchildren in school. I mean, this crap's got to stop. Not only do they feed horrible books to our kids, but now they're going to try to stop us from doing anything about it. We have to do something. I mean, we have to do something about this, folks. The U.S. Constitution was written to protect we the people from governmental overreach. The Freedom to Read Act was written to protect the government from claimed overreach of the people. The FRA is unconstitutional. So, you know, it's interesting to see the three-pronged approach about what's obscene. I mean, in the end, it can be, is that it?
That's your time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're not done. We've just gone to white.
Anyone else for audience participation?
My name is Linda Spohn, and I'm terribly unorganized tonight. I do appreciate your report. I learned a lot. I appreciate that. I know it took a lot of time. But I didn't understand why it's so hard to define obscenity. One thing in there that just wasn't, it didn't fit anywhere. I couldn't understand where this would fit in is pornography is an addiction. It leads to more and more and more and worse and worse and worse. And it doesn't apply to anything in this report, addictions. And so why would taxpayers be forced to provide addictive material to minors? Why would librarians fight so hard to keep perverted, vulgar, obscene filth in libraries? We never have said anything about banning or burning books. It's available everywhere. We're just wondering why taxpayers have to buy it. We don't buy every book in the world. We sift them out a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of books out there. We don't buy everything. And they say, oh, but there's just a little bit in there. A little poison goes a long way. You know, rat poisoning is 99.9% food and only a tenth poison. A little poison goes a long way. So we aren't against anyone having freedoms or access to their First Amendments. We're just not, we've never said anything that we want to limit anybody. You want pornography, it's out there. But for children, it shouldn't be accessible. And we don't want to fund it. Okay, so what's next? These other there's other addictions, drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, condoms. Is that what's next? They're all addictions. They weren't addressed in here either. Taxpayers, do taxpayers have to pay for everything? For everybody? You know, we're taxed for plenty of things that we don't agree with, but to be taxed for pornography for children, it's beyond belief. I can't believe we're even having these meetings. Yeah, okay, let's see. I think that's probably it. I can't think of anything else unless I start reading porn to you, and I can hardly stomach that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for audience participation?
Are we supposed to sign in? I noticed no one else signed in. Okay, so I'll leave spaces for them.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. This is my first time appearing.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Mary Robinson. I'm a borough resident. And as a borough resident, and everyone in here, I'm presuming is a borough resident, taxpayers will be paying roughly $21,000 for the school district to ban one book that was never in the library at all. So it works both ways. I will defend the First Amendment with my dying breath. As the expression goes, you can say everything up to fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire. But there is a very small subset of people manufacturing a moral crisis for political posturing. The First Amendment is a right. With rights come responsibility and obligations. For instance, not to spread misinformation or disinformation. I'd like to close by complimenting the Palmer Public Library. I have occasion, I go over there about once a week. You have trained professionals. They are trained in developing your library collection. I would hope that you utilize their expertise. This has been turned into a war by people, as I say, manufacturing a moral crisis for political posturing. If this were about the Second Amendment, there'd be 1,000 people here. I'm a lifelong reader, and I just don't understand why Mayor Edna DeVries can pass a resolution saying everyone should have a gun and ammunition, but people are afraid of books. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I must be someone else. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mike Malewski, and I live within the confines of great city of Palmer. I'm going to take a different tack, and I'm going to be talking about a midget. Matt Midget, actually. That midget. If you don't know, he's an employee of the city, and I think it would be worth your while meeting him and having a conversation. He's been in a couple of times. I interviewed him recently, and I'm going to go all the way back to the time before we were informed about the legal issues associated with libraries, to a statement made by the manager that had to do with the colorful pieces of paper you may have received if you live in the city with your water bill.
Matt came in to specifically explain the process, the whys, the hows, and what you might be able to do if you were running into some difficulty, like you don't know where your water meter is, et cetera. Because he offered, and he had already come to a few people's homes at their request, and in a couple of minutes showed what needed to be done. The manager mentioned Flint, Michigan. We had received these forms and looked at it and said, yeah, we live in a house built in 1938. It, however, has been renovated. So the real question was, and we understand, I have photos of the renovation that suggest that the plumbing was significantly improved, but that still left the question of the connection to the city and that pipe coming in. So we will be scraping the pipes and putting a magnet on and seeing and determining the quality they're in and responding. I think I'm a curious person, so it's to our benefit to take a look and say this is good, and to be able to share that information. So if there needs to be a developed larger plan for the city, in particular its infrastructure, all of the homes, and I know there'll be people who will not respond one way or the other, and that's okay. But I think it's still a worthy effort, and I like the idea that I get to choose. In this case, we're choosing to do it. I would submit that you might choose to go to our website, Big Cabbage Radio, and take a listen, because he really does a nice job. He's got a great radio voice, and you'll be informed as to all the detail from his really vast experience with utilities. He's the utilities manager for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for audience participation?
My name is Mark Spohn, and a lot of talk here. I heard you might have got some more government money coming your way for the library. I really advise all of you, you've got a responsibility. Remain debt-free. Do not have any debt beyond what you can collect prior to building. And however the building's designed, it's probably not going to meet the needs of Palmer. It sounds like you're going to make it for Lost Anchorage or Chicago. That's up to you. I don't think they're going to listen to us on that. But debt-free, where there's no burden to the taxpayers, would be very, very wise. And whatever the snow load, the engineers say, just double that. That's money well spent. You're not going to go wrong on that. Trust me. And there's a lot of debate here. These library or people that print these books and publishers, it's advantageous for them to push that book as hard as they can, no matter how bad it is. You know, it's on the bestseller. Oh, well, we better get that. It's a bestseller book. That's all marketing. That's up to them to push that. So just be aware of that. And, you know, for people to go home at night, whether it's the council members here or any of you in this room, to think what you're doing to children. What greater responsibility do we have? You don't really have much responsibility to somebody my age, because I'm not going to be around to kick the can much longer probably. But a little kid, to corrupt their mind, we shouldn't take a chance. I'd rather err on the side of caution to not harm a mind of a kid. So just think about that, what you're doing here. There is responsibilities. Be bold, don't be afraid. If you're protecting children, that's a pretty worthy cause. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And if I didn't address you properly, I appreciate the mayor and the council here. I don't like to public speak, so I'm pretty bad at it.
You did fine.
Hi, I'm Susan Pouger, and I am here to do a library palate cleanser, if you will. So I'm just going to tell you what's going on at the library. February library programs are in full swing. Pick up the self-affirmation love notes for Kids Craft. You can pick up one of the couples book display with a book and movie before they get put back on the shelves. You have a month left to file your PFD, and forms are pre-addressed envelopes are available in the library lobby. IRS forms 1040 and 1040 SR have finally been shipped, and those are also going to be available in the lobby when they arrive. March activities begin next Tuesday. Midweek meetup is the new regular program with rotating themes for students. It's held upstairs at the library on Wednesday from 3 to 5. Pi Day and STEAM activity is the first one on March 6th. Family story time at the Palmer Fire Station on Saturday, March 9th at 3 o'clock. Baby lap sit for 3 to 5 and 3 to 5 year old story time. The last two Tuesdays, March 19th and 26th. Tuesday, March 19th. Also, you can join the Friends of the Palmer Library for their monthly meeting. Last Saturday of every month is Craft Club for adults, 12:30 to 3:30. Bring a project and work on and chat upstairs with fellow creators. Drop in March 30th and stay for a while. The book display is Read 'em and Weep, and it's all books that will make you cry. We're setting up March Madness bracket of picture book characters for all ages, so you can come in and pick your favorites and do a March Madness. And kids can grab a free craft kit that changes a couple times a month, and right now it's leprechaun hats. So you can look at the Palmer Library website for updates to programs and activities, and free resources for job search, schoolwork, health, parenting with technology, genealogy, gardening, foreign language, and small business support. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else for audience participation? Okay, we'll close audience participation. And next we have no public hearings, no action memorandum, no unfinished business, no new business, record of items placed on the table.
PowerPoint presentation from the city attorney and document from Jackie Goforth.
Okay. And next we have audience participation. I won't read the same spiel, but our code specifies that we have two for our regular meeting. So anyone wishing to address the council, please start with your name and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Linda Spohn, and I forgot to say we are a member of the American Library Association. We do pay dues, and we shouldn't. We shouldn't be a member, and we shouldn't pay dues, and we don't need the American Library Association telling us which books should be in our local libraries. And, you know, when these librarians come to the meetings, rather than just tell us about all the wonderful, cute little activities at the library, it'd be kind of nice to know what their opinion is on these books. They never approach the subject of these books in the libraries. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for audience participation?
Hello again, my name is Jackie Goforth. The American Library Association is a nonprofit. It's a nonprofit. They have lots of chapters. There's one in Alaska, the Alaska Library Association. They don't have any legal standing. All of the documents in the policy are what they wrote. It's like the Red Cross saying they're going to take type A blood today. They don't have any legal standing. So, when the librarians met at Fairbanks last year in March, this is what they said. There's a necessity for sex-themed books for youth 12 years and older. They're meant to teach lessons about sex and relationships for the reader to carry away the information and incorporate it into their lives. It's a gentle gateway into the world of sex. For youth who come from what they call conservative families, these sexualized novels are a kind of safe or secret source for these kids. They're not as obvious as a nonfiction book on sexuality. That means the parents would often not question the reading of these materials because the information is kind of hidden within. That's exactly why I began this. Because the material is hidden within, and what is hidden within these covers is unbelievable. I believe that the parents are the ones I'm talking to, and they're the ones who need to know exactly what's in those books. Exactly. It's parents beware. If you sent your child to a library for a luncheon, and they all got a box luncheon, and you'd signed off saying it was okay, but 0.2% of them had cigarettes in them, who has done the illegality? Who has distributed the illegal substance? It's not the parents. The parents don't know what's between those covers. That's why we read them, and it's a horrendous experience. Now, I have written an official complaint to the Attorney General and the Ombudsman for violating my First Amendment rights. Wasilla did that. They told me who I can talk to and who I can't. And they also told them they can't talk to me. Now, your policy that says I can't redress my grievance with a government, I have to go through a library, you might want to reconsider that. In New Jersey, they're fighting it now, saying it's a violation of the First Amendment. I have to go through a librarian to redress my grievance about these books, and she doesn't even answer me. That's why you only have 2. They're from me. It took 6-8 months. And you wouldn't believe how much I had to go through, because I'm writing Palmer's letter now, too. Because it's called retaliation. It's a retaliation for me trying to redress my grievance against the government. And I'm allowed to say this. If you read Sullivan versus New York Times Supreme Court decision, things can be very vitriolic. They can be very passionate. But I'm allowed to say that because that's what open discourse is in a republic and in a democracy. It's been already adjudicated by the Supreme Court.
That's your time.
Again? Well, thank you.
Hi, my name's Karen Lewis. Mr. Mayor and Council. I wanted to talk about the 3 prongs. The first one is whether the average person applying contemporary adult community standards finds that the matter taken as a whole, interesting verbiage, appeals to prurient interest. And the examples here are erotic, lasciviousness, abnormal, unhealthy, degrading, shameful, or morbid interest in nudity, sex, or excretion. 2, whether the average person applying contemporary adult community standards finds that the matter depicts or describes sexual conduct in a patently offensive way. The examples here are ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated, masturbation, excretory functions, lewd exhibition of the genitals, or sadomasochistic sexual abuse. Now, these are one of the things that hold it as obscene. Okay, these are the 3 prongs that decides whether the material is obscene. Those first 2 are pretty easy, and these books are that. And I believe they are the 3rd one too. I mean, they lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. When they say you can't find all the obscene material, and you just look at that, I mean, it's really, some of this stuff's really obscene, as you know. And then you put the theory of relativity at the end. Does that make it okay because there's that scientific piece in there? You know, I mean, come on. I know it's law, but we have to, maybe if we had the moral compasses we wouldn't even put these things in there. Why are the librarians insisting on having this filth in the libraries? I don't understand it. I mean, it's in the natural realm, it doesn't make any sense. In the spiritual realm, it does. There are demonic forces, and this is absolutely part of that. Maybe you don't believe in God or anything that goes with that. But the truth is, we're eternal beings having a physical experience. And that eternal being, as soon as you die, that eternal being is there. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Good evening again, Mary Robinson, and I was remiss in not complimenting Ms. Heath on your report and the fact that she concentrated on the legal aspects, because First Amendment does guarantee honest, open discourse, both sides of any question, some good questions from the council members, but at the end of the day, even the State of Alaska Attorney General Taylor's letter of the 16th of November 2023 stated that each instance would be a fact-specific inquiry. So thank you, and I was remiss for not thanking you, Ms. Heath, for the first time for your excellent presentation. And again, I'd like to compliment the Palmer Public Library. You have trained librarian staff that at a minimum 4 years, if not 6 years, for their MLIS. Why you would not rely on them, there's a vicious rumor going around that if it hasn't already happened, that some of the staff had their pay grades decreased, which I find troubling for many different reasons. But again, Ms. Heath, thank you. Excellent report. And again, I'd like to compliment the Palmer Public Library. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for audience participation? Okay. We will close audience participation. Council member comments. Council member Moline. You're surprised.
Goodness.
I like starting with the quiet ones.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, as per usual, I just really appreciate everybody coming out, participating in public comments. That's what this is about. It's having open dialogue, and regardless of how testy or vitriolic it might become, that's our First Amendment right, is to come and especially talk to your council members. So I applaud you for that. I really, anything else that I have to say, I think is probably going to be brought forward in a future council meeting. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Tudor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to mirror what Councilwoman Moline was saying. Thank you all for coming out and giving your testimony. And I think we're definitely have a lot of things to chew on to come up with action to move forward. We're definitely in a pickle. I mean, it's one of those things where it's difficult. Where, as a father of 3, I understand everyone's concern about these books. But I want to make sure that we operate in a legal framework that makes sure that we protect the rights of future generations as well. So we have definitely some work ahead of us. And just a thank you. Well, I was down in Juneau with some other council members and the mayor, and it was a very educational experience. It was great. And I just want to say a big thank you to Delana Johnson and Shelley Hughes for the support they gave the city of Palmer in getting us so much money for the library. That was tremendous. Because again, the goal is to, is one of my things I put up at the last meeting, is to have as little debt, if at all, as possible. Because I want to make sure that we don't burden us with debt. So, thank you.
Councilman Alcantara.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Definitely along the lines what the previous speakers have said about the passion of folks that come and testify. Certainly appreciated. What I want to touch on is how much I appreciate what the libraries actually do. And one of the audience members mentioned that, providing PFD applications, providing 1040 IRS forms and different things. I can think of, my 4 children have used the Palmer Library, I would say sparingly, and they've used mostly their high school and middle school libraries. But I recall many years ago in 1986, I worked for a fledgling record company in Sacramento, California, downtown Sacramento. Every Saturday, I would escape the 10 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment and make an 18-mile drive out to UC Davis, because Sacramento State didn't carry the Anchorage Times and the Anchorage Daily News, but UC Davis did. And so that was like my realm of escape, and go and learn and keep abreast of what was going on in Alaska by making that drive out to UC Davis every Saturday. And there's things that, I never did. I never checked out any other books. I never did anything but go there, take advantage of what was being offered, and kept abreast of what was happening back in Alaska. So when I came back to the legislative session in 1987, I would know what the issues were. And without that library, subscribing and having those newspapers, I never would have been able to do it. There wasn't phones and emails and internet and everything else. You had to have some place to go and make it happen. So libraries mean a lot to a lot of different people. I hope that our voters passed a $10 million bond proposition. So I hope, and overwhelmingly, and I hope we recognize that. And as we move forward, I hope we consider that this library project that we're going to embark on, hopefully be completed in a couple of years, is a chance to really enhance Palmer. And I've been in Palmer all my life, from 1,500 people to now over 6,000, and I want to see Palmer enhanced for my kids and my grandkids. Thank you.
Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Carla for coming in and talking about the Soroma. I met her 20 years ago, I think, when she was a student when we went over to Japan, and I was absolutely impressed by the wrestlers. The one young lady who had a 33-0 record, and then won her last match 15-0. Absolutely phenomenal to me. We're raising some good kids around here. It was sad. Unfortunately, it was sad to see they were from Colony, not from Palmer High, but we'll take it anyway. And we did go to AML, and I'm going to leave all those kind of comments to my compatriot here on the left, because we end up seeing a lot of people the last couple of days and stuff. So thank you.
Councilman Best.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilman Cooper. Just to kind of recap the Juneau trip with the mayor and Josh and Jim over here. We were really lucky. We had a very gracious House Representative, Delana Johnson. She's co-chair of finance. She availed herself and her staff to us for, it was probably close to an hour, where it was just kind of an ad hoc kind of thing, and we're really able to chat with her and hear her thoughts on kind of where the budget was and what Palmer's opportunities are. Same with Senator Hughes, was able to really listen to what they're having to deal with down in Juneau, and if and then Councilman Cooper, I want to just say Mayor Cooper, and I was also on the AML board But we availed ourselves to be able to walk the halls of Juneau for those 4 days and was able to get in for moments at a time sometimes, and also with staff, and be able to really represent the city of Palmer. And one of our biggest things that we were talking to them about it is what is on our list. The number one priority really is the public safety. And when we heard them talk about some of the monies that might be coming into the valley, the court system is also looking at trying to expand here in Palmer. They're looking at adding 3 more court venues because it is the busiest court in the state of Alaska. And so they understand that there's a need there. We also expressed to them our public safety building because of its confinement, and it was really not purpose-built for how we're utilizing it. And like most of the employees of the city of Palmer, they do more with less than anybody that I know of. They're really packed in there. They're utilizing closets for office space, and just, you know, we're busting at the seams. The valley has been really growing for 25 years solidly, and we all understand that impact. But to the point, your council representatives that went down there to really extol the needs of our community was just a real team effort, and I would like to thank everybody that went down there. And this has been something that we've always been really good at. That it's a real team effort down there to express. And this community over the years has always tried not to be the one down there with hat in hand all the time and asking for money. But it's just we're getting to the point where we are providing services that are really outside of our boundaries, that we need them to recognize that we're a hub of services for the entire borough, and for when it comes to a regional allotment of funds to help on these projects, that we really express it, and your representatives in the legislature are fully aware of it. We reached out to so many different areas, and I just really would like to say hats off to everybody that participated. I appreciate it.
If you don't mind, if I might add, on the airplane ride back, we were very fortunate that Mr. Best got to sit fairly close to the governor, and on his way out, he kind of cornered him and put a bug in his ear as well for the public safety building. And so, we hit a lot of people, Senator Keel and Wilson, and there are a couple others that I don't remember right now, but it was a good time, and I think we got the bug in people's ear, and I think we might see something come out of that.
Thanks. A couple items I have is I've been asked to do a letter of support for the Palmer Food Bank. So if there's no objection from the council, I'll get that written up and probably included in the next packet. And I'd also heard, I don't know how many people know Verna Ewer. She was one of the staunch supporters dragging forth to get the 1984 library built. Anyway, she's apparently in hospice, and or some saying she's got only a week to a month to live. But Lyda Green passed away. Senator Green passed away last week. Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Best.
I'd like to lend my support to the food bank, and that was actually a subject that came up when we were in discussions with some of the legislature that Shelley Hughes and Representative Johnson had actually had the state folks and had the governor over there walking that facility to express kind of that need. So that's an absolute. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And with that, we're adjourned.